Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The SparkFile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, your go-to source for creative inspiration.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're an OG listener, welcome back, Sparkler. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. But you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it? These are good questions, and we have answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations.
Here's the deal. We are makers who make all kinds of things.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time or want to be making stuff all the time, you know that the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry.
So we're on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a well-versed understanding of the long-standing battle for basic human rights.
Or a creative call to action.
Every episode, we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
And if you're not careful, you might just be able to imagine a different kind of future. So without further ado, let's open up the Spark File. Camion.
Oh, Blackwell.
How you doing, baby Cams?
I'm not going to lie. It's hard to think about much else, besides what's going on in the world right now.
It is hard, but I know that we also, you and I both have all sorts of other responsibilities on top of the things that are going on in the world, on top of the things that are happening in the world. There's also work responsibilities we have, financial responsibilities that we have, responsibilities to family and loved ones. I'm sure I'm singing a tune that everybody is familiar with.
Yeah, and I'm feeling really grateful because I work with people who, at the top of every meeting, there has been an acknowledgement of George Floyd. There has been acknowledgement of feelings and emotions that people are having, and at least naming that, focusing on whatever the topic of the meeting is, feels insignificant. Somewhat insignificant in light of all the other things we're carrying.
I think to acknowledge that all of this conversation, hell, the conversation you and I are having right now, rests on top.
Yes, it does.
These things that are happening in the world.
Yep, it really does. So
here we are.
So here we are. I'm not going to lie. My spark is highly influenced by all of this, Suze. All of it.
Excellent.
I'm just going to jump in and tell you just like, yeah, everything that's happening in the world, the brutal murder of George Floyd, the ensuing protests, and incredibly important conversations about Black Lives Matter and why all lives matter doesn't quite cut it. The social media blackout, the pallets of bricks or possibly no pallets of bricks, the white supremacists, the Boogaloo Boys, Antifa, the president's photo op, General
Go straight
Mattis,
to the center of it, Laura Camion.
My God, General Mattis condemning his behavior. I mean, it has been a real challenge to think of anything else mattering right now. Like, is there anything more important than human rights? And in particular, Black human rights. So this week got me thinking, I mean, among other things, first of all, why the hell is this a battle that still has to be fought?
Right.
You know, why do Black and brown people still have to fight for their rights over and over and over again? What does it say about humankind that centuries and centuries go by and we can't agree on the fact that humans are humans and we deserve equal rights?
I think there's and if I'm jumping your spark and you're going to get to this, then please tell me to shut the fuck up.
I will.
There's something, I know you will, you sweet, sweet girl. There's something about this. We were talking about this last night. This is a problem that was created by white people. And the idea that people of color, Black people, brown people have to fight for these rights or solve this, I feel like is completely inaccurate and inappropriate. I feel like this was a situation. This was created by white people. And I think that white people need to do a lot of work to find and implement solutions around this.
100%. That's not the entire topic of my spark, but I'm in complete agreement with you.
Rock on.
You know what I mean? I'm just, I agree with you. It's not their problem to solve. It's, there's a lot of white people that have some real work to do ahead. You know, I got to thinking about just what does it say about America that we can't agree on equal rights 150 years after slavery was abolished. And the word I realized I was looking for is not great. I can tell you that the word is not great. Great doesn't even come close to describing America in, you know, as long as we don't figure this out. So we live in a society where we deny groups of people human rights, and then we're shocked or we criticize when people fight for their rights or fight for their lives, literally. So I got sparked thinking about the long history of protesting, because this is top of mind as I'm watching this play out. And I started to wonder whether or not it's ever been truly successful in making change. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I really needed to know if there was hope that true social justice and genuine social change might actually be a result of all of this. So I had to dig into it, as you do.
I love this, especially pursuant to our conversation with Donna Lieberman, where she was saying that yes to peaceful protest, yes to civil disobedience, but no good can come of violent protest. I thought that was so interesting because she is a person who has been around long enough that she has seen all manner of protest. She has been part of all different kinds of protests. So I felt like she had an informed opinion about that.
She did. And she really sparked some of this thinking. And I'm going to get into that peaceful versus civil disobedience too.
Oh,
So
Camian,
you're so
I
right
am
on target,
so
Blackwell.
bucking here for this spark. Thanks for
All
doing
right.
this. Thanks for
You
doing
bet.
this. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know I'm here for you. So first of all, I had to remind myself, is peaceful protest a right protected by the Constitution? And the answer, you might be surprised to know, is yes, sort of, kind of. The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So really, the protection of our right to peaceful protest is kind of a mashup of our right to assemble, our right to free speech, and the right to petition the government when we have a grievance.
Got it.
So it doesn't like explicitly say it, but if you mash those three things together, it does. It does protect us. But according to law, any public property can be used for a traditional public forum where ideas are shared. But most state and city ordinances require notice and appropriate permits if the demonstration plans to do things like make noise, like amplify volume,
Right.
or plans to cross traffic during a march or gather in such a large crowd that it blocks pedestrian or vehicle traffic. However, this was interesting. Police cannot use failure to secure a permit in response to demonstrations that respond to breaking news. So, for example, like when a verdict is announced in a high-profile case like Rodney King, demonstrations can and did pop up immediately, and the police are not allowed to shut it down just because you didn't file a permit in advance. So, good to know. Permits are nice, but if something is happening in real time, protests can absolutely fully spring to life in a moment's notice.
Interesting.
So there's been many relatively peaceful protests in history that are well known. And I just want to touch on a couple. These are trust me, there's multiple stories to be told in each and every one of these. But these are, in other countries, some peaceful protests. The Salt March in 1930, Gandhi led a peaceful protest against Britain's rule by walking 240 miles, followed by dozens of other people to...
Wow.
I don't know. Did you ever see that movie, Gandhi?
It has been decades.
It's been a long time because we would have been children, but I remember that movie really did this moment justice because I have a real clear visual in my mind. But he was walking to the Arabian Sea to collect a bit of salt out of the sea because this exact act had been deemed illegal by the British. No Indian could collect or sell salt in the country.
Wow.
So it took 17 years, but eventually India gained independence from Britain. This one I hadn't heard of, the singing revolution. It did bring me a little bit of joy to think about this, though. In 1988, more than 100,000 Estonians literally gathered to sing their way out of Soviet Union rule. They sang for 5 nights straight in protest, and it was known as the Singing Revolution. Wow. Just 2 years later, in 1991, this little small country regained its independence from the Soviet Union.
Can I ask, Camian, and if from your research, do you know, why was that effective? Why was the singing revolution and singing for 5 nights effective?
I'm going to get into, not specifically the singing revolution, but I'm going to get into what makes peaceful protests effective.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. The Berlin Wall coming down in 1989, although the Berlin Wall had divided East and West Berlin for 28 years. In 1989, repeated public protests started to take place, and those protests put pressure on the German government. And 2 months later, that was one of the quickest I'd seen like a response to. 2 months later, they demolished the wall. I remember that moment from high school.
Oh, yeah. I remember Tom Brokaw being like, they're dancing on the Berlin Wall.
So huge.
Yeah.
So I'm not meaning it to sound like those are nice and tidy protests that lead, to change immediately. Not at all. Sometimes protests are just the inciting incident. And it can take months or years or decades to see change happen. But looking at those other countries' examples did give me a little hope that peaceful protests can make a change. But here we are in America. Mm-hmm. And I would like to specifically focus on some of the protests throughout U.S. history that Black or brown people have had to organize, whether planned or spontaneous acts of protest, just to try to call attention to their human rights and perhaps help us all begin to understand just how many fights, how many battles have been fought on the way to their desired freedom. There's so many more than what I'm about to share, and we're in the midst of many more because we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So here are just a few. One that comes to mind immediately is the Silent Parade of July 28, 1917. The New York Times said of this parade the following day, this is a quote, "To the beat of muffled drums, 8,000 Negro men, women, and children marched down Fifth Avenue yesterday in a parade of silent protest against acts of discrimination and oppression." The protests were silent. Think about that.
That is amazing.
Silent. No rallying cries, nothing. The women wore white, the men wore black, and it was an incredibly powerful event, which is considered possibly the first African-American civil rights march in our country. Certainly it was the first in New York City. The Bowery Boys podcast just did a great episode about this protest and the brutal violence against Blacks that led up to it. So check that out.
That is an amazing spark.
Isn't that incredible? I want to see that movie. I want people to bring that story to life.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Of course, there was the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, Rosa Parks famously refusing to take her place at the back of the Montgomery bus. Her defiant act symbolized greater civil rights, spreading the message that all people deserve equal seats. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled a year later, in 1956, that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. Rosa said this wasn't planned or carefully executed. She said, "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I was not tired physically or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in." So that one, I think, we've all heard stories of Rosa Parks, but she certainly, she was all alone in that protest. It wasn't pre-planned, and she didn't have any support from others in that moment. And I got to believe she's just one of, hundreds of thousands of people whose stories maybe didn't turn out as hers did.
Yes.
So also in 1969, but this time in Syracuse, New York, a group of incorrectly named the Syracuse 8 by the media, they actually had 9 members, and that pissed me off so much. I was like, talk about feeling invisible. My God, see them, count them. There were 9 of them. But nonetheless, the media calls them the Syracuse 8. I will call them the Syracuse 9. These 9 people protested unequal access for Black football players on their university by boycotting their athletic performance. The 9 students behind the boycott were Gregory Allen, Richard Bowles, Dana Harrell, John Godbolt, John Lobon, Clarence Bucky McGill, Alif Muhammad, Dwayne Walker, and Ron Womack. The student athletes just 4 demands were access to the same academic tutoring as their white teammates, better medical care for all team members, starting assignments based on merit, and racially integrating the coaching staff, which had been all white since 1898.
What year was this, Cams?
So this year, that was in 1969.
Oh,
so
wow.
At that time, they were labeled Black dissidents. The Syracuse Nine were suspended from the team. Some of the white teammates stood in solidarity and threatened to boycott if the Black players were not allowed back, but they were overpowered by the alumni who wanted all the Black players off the team and their scholarships revoked. So the Syracuse Nine continued their boycott through the 1969 football season. The Syracuse chancellor, prompted by faculty sympathetic to the players, allowed the players to keep their scholarships and to graduate, which they did. In 2006, 36 years after leaving the team, during a Syracuse University of Louisville halftime ceremony, the 9 former players were recognized with their Letterman jackets for the courageous stand they took against racism.
That's amazing.
Again, how many people and how many stories do we not know? Because this is like, it's just too common. I'll just leave it there. It's just too common. Yeah. Marsha P. Johnson is a famous Black transgender protester of the LGBTQIA plus community who helped incite the Stonewall riots in response to police aggressions towards gays, lesbians, trans people in the bar scene. During the 1960s, it was considered illegal for people to dress as anything other than their birth gender, and bars had specific qualifications on how many, quote, correctly gendered pieces of clothing a person had to be wearing before they could be served.
Holy it was fucking shit. This is like yesterday.
Really?
This is like...
It's too much. It was also illegal for homosexual couples to hold hands, kiss, show any kind of public affection, or even gather together. So oftentimes, if the police believed you to be, quote, too gay for public viewing, you could be fined for disorderly conduct. The Stonewall Inn, located on Christopher Street in New York, was a favorite target of police and subject to many raids and seizures. Witnesses have said that police officers would often bring suspected crossdressers into the bathrooms and force them to strip down to prove their birth gender. On June 28th, 1969.
Trauma on top of trauma,
right?
On top of trauma.
It's too much. On June 28, 1969, enough was finally enough, and following a police raid and the arrest of 13 people, 5 days of protesting began. On the first anniversary of those riots, the world saw its first pride parade called Christopher Street Libertarian Day, where protesters chanted out, "Say it loud, gay is proud." So that is Marsha. And then, more famous and more visible are protests like the March on Washington, which was 1963, where 200,000 people gathered in the nation's capital to protest injustices for Black Americans. This protest ended with Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech delivered during a rally to promote racial equality in the United States. And this event is often credited with pressuring JFK to write concrete civil rights legislation. And then there's Selma. In 1965, Black Americans had been granted the right to vote, but major voter suppression was occurring in Alabama. Protesters planned to march from Selma to Montgomery, but were brutally attacked by state protesters and forced to retreat. And this brings up a very interesting point. This entire time, I've been mentioning peaceful protests and the fact that they're protected by the Constitution. What about violent ones? No, violent protests are considered civil disobedience, and it is not protected although some groups consciously use it to get the attention that their cause needs. Unfortunately, while it might get them media attention for a short while, typically it has not fared well when a group is violent. Potential allies and supporters are turned off when they see that your group is harming others. What is most successful is when nonviolent protest can bring out the ugly, violent side of the government or the state. This is a little twisted. In a recent article in the New Yorker, they featured an interview with Omar Wasow, a professor of politics at Princeton. Omar studies protest movements and their effects on politics and elections. And he said this about Selma.
That's fucking fascinating.
What? That he studies that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's that article is incredible, and it just came out a few days ago. So if you can find it, the New Yorker, Omar Wasow, amazing. He said this about Selma. The interesting thing to me that came out of this research was the civil rights leaders were picking Birmingham and Selma specifically because they had police chiefs with hair-triggered tendencies toward violence. So there was this strategic use of violence by the civil rights movement, but it was to be the object of violence, not the instigators of violence.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I understand the strategy of it. And I think those amazing protesters, those bodies, they put their bodies into their fight.
Yeah, they did. It's an incredible risk to take, but it's one that peaceful protesters know all too well. Those in power, the police, the military, the government, may often be the first to show a display of force. Wow. So the flip side of that, also from the New Yorker article, Professor Wasow says, so I think there's a lot of evidence that nonviolent tactics can be effective. You saw this on the first day in Minneapolis, where the police showed up with the excess of force, and you had these images of children running away and police dressed like stormtroopers. So a nonviolent protest where we see state excess is a very powerful and sympathetic narrative for the cause of fighting police violence.
Yeah.
That has an unfortunate side effect of muddying the story. Instead of talking about the history of police killings in Minneapolis, we're talking about a store going up in flames, and the focus is on reporting tends to shift from a justice frame to a crime frame. And that is the unfortunate thing for a protest movement. It ends up undermining the interests of the advocates. So just thinking about that for a minute, like, I was fascinated by this topic of violent protest because I think you can see now that the stories are getting muddy and they're intentionally confused. So you can't tell who started the violence. That confusion is intentional because it's all about detracting support for the peaceful protesters. And if you can get people to believe that those protesters incited the violence, they will lose support and the protests will dwindle.
This reminds me of this conversation that we've had. I've had it in life. I believe I've had it on the podcast, though they tend to blend together and I can't keep track anymore. But it's about storytelling, whether you're a political organizer, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a researcher, whether you work for insurance reform, you have to find a way and a platform to tell that story clearly, or the story just doesn't make it to the light of day. And I'm thinking now with what you're describing with these protests and the ensuing coverage that comes out of it. I've seen especially on social media, where people are like, don't get distracted. They're trying to get you to look over here at the crime aspect. You're looking in the wrong place. Like it's like a magic trick, and they're trying to get you to look in the wrong direction.
That's right. And in terms of the storytelling, visuals tell a very strong story. So if they can capture photographs of someone who appears to be on the peaceful protester side, but is throwing a firebomb into a building, yeah, then you've lost that story. You've lost control of that story entirely. It's clear, like, if the story is clear that the protesters are peaceful and that it is the police, the military, or the government who are violent towards them, well, history has shown that in that case, large swaths of people will respond in support of the protesters. And this is making me think of like Tiananmen Square. So you had peaceful protesters, students sitting, literally like sitting for days, and then the government brings in tanks.
Yes.
And so that kind of story, I mean, that's not the kind of story like the government actually wants to get out. But when people saw those images, they were outraged.
Yeah.
So speaking of supporters, in an article on courts by Dan Koff, they claim that a study by Harvard University and Stockholm University finds that protests do in fact have a major influence on politics, just not in the way you might think. The true reason that political protests lead to change, it's not to do with the engagement of political leaders. It's because protests supercharge everyday citizens to become active, visible advocates in social change that they may have been supporting before, but just kind of on a casual level of engagement. Protests bring people out of their homes into the cultural tide and give them space to use their powers for good. There's also psychological reasons that people protest. In an article on Forbes by Nicole Fisher, they outline the conditions that, when present, make for the most explosive or engaged protest. Listen to these: lack of trust in government or authority, shared grievances, shared intensity, anonymity, survival triggers like fight or flight, efficiency. When you're doing something alone, it feels like a waste of time. But when you see someone else like stand up for their rights, other people are more likely to do the same thing. So I just want to be clear here for a second. The brutal murder of George Floyd is reason enough to protest and to activate, period, full stop. But that list of psychological reasons why we protest in general also applies here. We've been dealing with the erosion of trust in our leadership. We've been dealing with a fight or flight feeling of survival mode with this pandemic and the lack of leadership. Black people have been dealing with a disproportionate death toll from the pandemic, and every day that goes by without a clear plan makes the situation disproportionately difficult for them.
My God, yes, 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 yes.
In fact, I read this fantastic article, another one in the New Yorker by Isaac Chotiner, with an interview with Opal Tometi, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. This interview is fantastic. She put it really well. She said, while we see that a lot of anger and outrage and frustration was sparked by the barbaric murder of George Floyd, it's also clear to me that we have been sitting in our homes, navigating the pandemic, dealing with loved ones being sick, dealing with a great deal of fear and concern about what the day and the future will hold. We have millions of people who have lost their jobs and filed for unemployment and are living paycheck to paycheck and hand to mouth. And I believe they are just thoroughly fed up and thoroughly beside themselves with grief and concern and despair because the government does not seem to have a plan of action that is dignified and comprehensive and seeks to address the core concerns that the average American has. And I believe there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes, Opal, yes.
People have been pent up at home watching these injustices play out over and over. And simple things like having to work might have kept people from being able to join a protest in the past. But without a job to go to, it's a lot easier to get involved and put yourself, in action.
The flip of that is interesting to me, is that the pain of this, the violence against people of color and Black people and the social injustice has tipped the scales where it outweighs people's concerns for their own safety and well-being and health.
That's right. They're like, fuck it, kind of, this is too important. This is more important. 100%. That's been amazing. Like, they've been sitting at home stressing about their health. And then this is like, no, this is too important.
Yeah.
So Barack Obama recently posted an article on Medium, and he said the waves of protests across the country represent a genuine and legitimate frustration over decades-long failure to reform police practices and the broader criminal justice system in the United States. The overwhelming majority of participants have been peaceful, courageous, responsible, and inspiring. They deserve our respect and support, not condemnation. So what do we make of it? A practice of educating ourselves, asking questions, and thinking critically when presented with information about protests, particularly the violent ones. A determination of support, decide how you're going to support, join the protests safely, make donations to key organizations, buy products from Black-owned businesses, join an anti-racist book club, decide how you're going to support and do it. And then, of course, create protest art, protest songs, murals, sculpture, plays, films, you name it. All of it is welcome. Of course, it was no surprise to me or anyone else that it would be Barack Obama who had the answer to my original question, can real and lasting change come out of this moment? He said, the bottom line is this: if we want to bring about real change, then the choice isn't between protest and politics. We have to do both. We have to mobilize to raise awareness, and we have to organize and cast our ballots to make sure that we elect candidates who will act on reform. So there it is. We have to protest. We have to vote. We have to protest. We have to vote. Stacey Abrams in the New York Times this week wrote an op-ed about how voting feels inadequate right now. She wrote, every night for more than a week, we have witnessed the anguish and anger of demonstrators, their cries punctured by politicians urging them to vote their power. Both are right. Protest to demand attention to the wrenching pain of systemic injustice. Vote because we deserve leaders who see us, who hear us, and who are willing to act on our demands. Voting will not save us from harm, but silence will surely damn us all. If there's any good to hold on to in all of this, I think it's watching and listening to the powerful Black voices rising up, seeing more white people listen and learn. It's seeing groups of people getting passionate about making a difference, making a change, and remaining energized until we see it. If we can sustain our collective engagement, keep the pressure on, we just might see the positive change. We just might actually live up to the aspiration of being great. But we have a long, long way to go. For anyone who is feeling the protests are futile, I offer you this. The famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote an essay for The Atlantic in which he reflected on the benefits of rebellion. There is cause to be thankful even for rebellion. It is an impressive teacher, though a stern and terrible one. He then concluded, the only thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion.
Camion, great
Blackwell,
spark.
I didn't get it.
Fucking
I did
spark.
not get through it without crying. I just want to acknowledge that. There's no going back.
Listen.
But that's where we're at. That's where we're at right now.
I'll take it. I'll take it any way I can get it. This is one of the cases where I think our sparks dovetail with each other. When I was doing research for my spark, I came across this piece of art that I loved, and I didn't end up referring to it in my spark, but I think it's relevant to share it with you now.
Ooh.
It's this beautiful piece that says, if you want nonviolent protests, listen to nonviolent protesters. And there's this little illustration of Colin Kaepernick kneeling.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, if you want nonviolent protests, you have to, listen when, instead of saying, how very dare they kneel.
Kneel. Yeah.
That's what nonviolent protest looks like.
I am kicking myself because I was going to include Colin Kaepernick, and I honestly, I just loaded my spark up and I was like,
that's okay. We're including him now.
It's, I think that is such a perfect example because we are in this moment where people are saying if you're wondering how we got here, it's like you didn't listen to this act and now you're being forced to pay attention to this act.
Yeah. Yeah. Great spark.
Thanks.
That's a sparkish spark.
There's
love
just
that.
so much I want to acknowledge. Like, there's just so much. There's so much story to be told in the
There's
fight
so
for
much you
human
can
rights.
share in 45 minutes.
Yeah,
You're not writing your
right.
doctoral thesis. We're just sharing some sparks here.
It's 10 pounds of spark in a 1 pound bag. But
as the old saying goes,
that's right.
I love that spark. Let's take a little break, and I'm going to just send some sparks your way. Camion, as I just said, I love the way that these little sparkies sometimes dovetail with each other. And that is definitely the case this week. As you laid out so beautifully, these are complicated times. As Donna Lieberman said in last week's Makersode, it's like we're experiencing two pandemics right now, a new one and an old one. We're experiencing the relatively young COVID-19 pandemic and this centuries-old pandemic of systematic violence towards and the oppression of people, and specifically in our country, people of color. And at a time when we could really, as a nation, benefit from some qualified political leadership, we not only don't have it's so funny when I say this, I think of in the mailbag recently, somebody wrote and was like, I know that you don't like to get political. And I was like, don't we?
But we always say we don't like to, and then we do.
Do we say we don't like to? Maybe. I don't know.
I think we usually lightly touch on listen, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but just one thing.
Here we are down the rabbit hole. So at this moment, not only do we not have qualified leadership, I believe we actually have destructive leadership.
Yeah.
So I actually think that might count as yet another epidemic. And all of these pandemics and epidemics just twist around each other like a bundle of snakes, moving rapidly on several different dimensions, pandemically, politically, societally. And a person can get overwhelmed easily during a time like this. How's that for an understatement? And if you're a person of color, or if you're a person who's been in the fight for a long time, or you've been on the receiving end of injustice for a long time, I can only imagine what that must feel like. I've seen this quote that has been attributed to a number of people: Tony Robbins, Dr. Henry Cloud, Dr. John Townsend. I don't know who said it first, but whoever said it, I'm feeling it. And that is this: we change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. I'm going to say it twice just because it's so nice. We change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. I feel like for many people, this is a moment when the pain of staying the same, for some people, this is so past due, but some people are just now coming into it. The pain of staying the same has become greater than the pain of changing.
Lived it. Yeah.
Yeah. We all know that change can be painful and laborious. It's one of the reasons I think just our reptilian brains resist change, because we know it's going to hurt and it's going to be a lot of work. But the possibility that exists on the continuum of positive change. I also know it can feel like it's impossible to make a difference. A sense of pessimism can take hold, a sense of hopelessness born out of fatigue and historical evidence supporting how difficult transformation is. But I read this post from the Twitter account of @noname, and this spoke to me. Pessimism is a tool of white supremacy. They don't want you to be imaginative about a world free from genocide, wealth hoarding, patriarchy, etc. In the moments when you think revolution is impossible, it's important to remember that way of thinking is inherently violent and supremacist. Those are strong words, but I think No Name is onto something. When I throw up my hands, or when you feel a sense of hopelessness, a lack of inspiration, a lack of creative problem solving, or a sense of pessimism, that's dangerous territory. I want to be clear, I'm all for the necessary rest and self-care. In fact, I do think it's vital, because we need to consistently restore ourselves and each other in order to continue fighting and finding creative ways to respond to injustice and ultimately to restructure our world and our communities. But I want to revisit a story that I told you all a while back. If you remember, I told you a story about a guy I met. I met a real human being Some of the names may have been changed to protect the innocent. We're going to call him Dave. And when I met him, I said, and I'm quoting this to the best of my ability, I said, "Hi, I'm Susan." And he said, "Hi, I'm Dave. It's nice to meet you." Boy, can you believe this? Can you believe what's happening in the world? It's out of control. I mean, I can't believe this is real. I am just freaking out. Can you believe that this is our world? And I said, "It's nice to meet you, Dave." Sidebar, this was shortly after the 2016 elections. And sweet Dave had some idea, but no idea what was coming down the pike.
Oh, boy.
Sidebar concluded. So even though I had just met Dave, yeah, poor sweet Dave, none of us knew. We had a feeling of dread, but look how it
wasn't big
taken
enough.
shape.
It was not big enough dread to contain what it has really transpired.
So here we are. So even though I had just met Dave, I did recognize that look in his eyes. I've seen that look in a lot of people's eyes. I've seen that look in my eyes in the mirror, that look when someone is overwhelmed by the injustice in the world, or maybe for the first time in their lives, they're fearing for their personal freedoms. And that fear and overwhelm had Dave turned inside out. And even though I had just met Dave, this is true. I'm surprised people don't smack me more. Even though I just met him, I reached over and I put my hand on his heart and I said, "Dave, let me ask you a question. How many times have you initiated this conversation in that way? I just met you and I don't know you, but if I may be so bold, I'd like to offer you something. And you can always tell me to go fuck myself, Dave, but I think I know what's going on here. I think you're addicted to the conversation. I think you're sort of addicted to this shitty swirl, and you talk and talk until you're blue, and then you stew and stew and stew and stew. But I swear there's other options. There's actually something you can do."
Ooh.
Which is my spark today. Making change, part deux.
Part two. Making change.
Here we go. So Spark sources include several things, including a Time magazine piece by Reza Bruner, an Elle magazine piece by Madison Feller, a Facebook event page by Kalia Perkins, a piece on vicenews.com by Samantha Cole, some other sources I'm going to cite along the way, and a tweet from Ego Nwodum. For those of you who don't know Ego Nwodum, she's a cast member on Saturday Night Live. I don't know her personally, but I think she's really great on that show. And she wrote something on her social media that really grabbed my attention. Another sidebar. I sort of hate social media on a good day. I hate that it's designed to suck us in and it's super sticky, and it essentially is constructed to get us to spend a lot of time sort of just staring blankly at our screens instead of taking action. Recently, there's been a demand for both institutions and individuals to make a public declaration about where you stand on what's going on, which I'm all for. But social media can feel, to me, so lacking and so reductive. Some people use the platform so creatively and so beautifully and make such a strong impact. But during this time, I personally was feeling this strong resistance to social media. And part of that was because I crave a longer form conversation or like a deeper dive, but it wasn't all of it. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I saw this tweet from Ego Nwodum, whose Twitter handle is @Aggie_boom. First of all, it was handwritten. She posted a photograph of like what I'm imagining was a handwritten page, maybe from her journal or something. I loved that. It reminded me of some of your Sparks cams about the power of handwriting. Ego Nwodum, you have great handwriting. So this is just a small portion of what she said. Please recognize your social media posts as simply a declaration of your commitment to do something every day to dismantle oppressive, racist systems, because so much of the work that needs to be done is internal, long-term, offline, real life work. And I was like, yes, that's it. That is it.
I think sorry.
Did you see
I didn't mean
it?
to interrupt you. I think I saw that. And I remember feeling the same way, like almost resentful. Like, of course, I'm going to post a post of support. That's who I am, and that's aligned with my beliefs. I can do that. But I felt more annoyed of like, but this isn't the action. this
isn't the action.
post isn't the action. And so I want someone to do a whole campaign that's like, what are you doing? What action are you taking?
What are you actually doing? Yeah, I think in this context, making a declaration on social media, it's making a pledge. It's making a commitment to do something in real life. As the hip hop group Stetsasonic once said, don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash. And as Ego Nwodim reminds us, that means internal, long-term, offline, real-life work.
Yes.
And I want to add that maybe could include real creativity and creative problem solving. So today, if you are listening to our voices and you're feeling overwhelmed, if you feel inspiration depleted, or you want to do more in real life, I want to share some sparks of creativity that people are fanning into real life flames. They are writing checks that their asses can cash, and it is giving me life. Yes. And that is saying a lot in these complex, rapidly changing bundle of snaky times. The interesting thing is that so much of this is blasting out through social media. So these are great examples of where people are marrying action and then just using social media as the megaphone to get it out. So
that's right.
There's that.
That's right. I loved what our dear friend Hunter Bell was doing, because he was posting the actions that he was taking, who he was supporting, donations.
Who's donating money to, what? No, not at all. Nope, not at all. That's exactly right. It sort of became just kind of like a scrapbook of action.
Yep.
Which I loved.
That's the proof in the pudding right there. Yeah. You're doing it.
Yeah. So there was a piece on time.com by Raisa Bruner that introduced some of the artists behind some of the most widely circulated images of George Floyd. George Floyd, as everyone knows, is a Black man who was killed by a Minneapolis police officer who suffocated George by kneeling on his neck. And the work that these artists are making is beautiful. It is thought-provoking. It is haunting. It is penetrating like a song or a scent that evokes a feeling. This art touches our emotional core. So last week I talked about the art of Shirian Damra, whose Instagram handle is @shirian.creates. And I wanted to learn more. I just mentioned her briefly as one of the, what do we make of this? And I wanted to take a deeper dive. So Shirian is a 33-year-old freelance user experience designer who lives in Chicago. And in the Time article, she said, I think art can touch our emotional core in a way that the news can't. True. And I think she's correct. Yeah, Shirian has created one of the most widely circulated images of George Floyd. It's a pastel, color-blocked portrait of George. His eyes are closed. He's wreathed in flowers. It's one in a series of similar portraits that Shirian has done for people who have fallen victim to violence. In an article in Elle magazine written by Madison Feller, it talks about how when Shirian first heard about the death of Ahmaud Arbery, she was horrified to hear about this young Black man in Georgia who was gunned down by two white men while he was out for a run in broad daylight. And while she couldn't bring herself to watch the video of the encounter, she wanted to create something. She was moved to create something that would be a gesture of solidarity with Black communities in their time of grieving, an art piece to raise awareness about what had happened, a tribute to combat the racist stereotypes that are often used to justify the killing of Black men. And in the Elle.com interview, Shirian said, I was afraid that people would only see the video and remember his soul being taken from him. Which I was just like, that is a spark moment. That desire to be like, instead of this person's life being defined by this moment of violence, let me make something that memorializes them and captures them in a beautiful way. Yes. So Shirian set out to make something soft, something with humanity that would celebrate his life. And she played around with different color palettes to see what kinds of emotions they evoked. And in the end, she chose bright colors and florals for her portrait of Arbery. attributes that she says are rarely seen in depictions of Black men. She says, there's this demonization that exists, and I wanted to challenge that.
Oh, amen.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Her work is beautiful. And I think its beauty allows people to take it in. It's like a point of access so that people can take it in and then enter into the story.
That's right. And with George as a human being, as a full person, and containing multitudes, and not just the victim of a police officer.
Yeah, and Ahmad as a whole human being, not just and Breonna as a whole, like a beautiful human being whose life was taken from them. So Sharian Damra has an interesting background, and I loved the way it has flowed into her work that she is doing now. According to the Elle magazine piece, art was one of Sharian's first loves, but for a while she stepped away from it. As the daughter of Palestinian Muslim immigrants who come from a refugee family, she was very aware of racism growing up, but something shifted when she was a freshman in high school and September 11th happened. Sharian said, there were a lot of intense hate crimes and really negative portrayals of Arabs and Muslims in the media, which got me to read more about systems of oppression, Islamophobia, racism across the board. She started out as an art major in college, but decided she needed to learn about social issues and switched to sociology, eventually getting her master's degree. After she graduated, she did advocacy work and she was a community organizer. But after a few years, she started to burn out. And then in 2015, she had to step away from her job when she was diagnosed with cancer. And during that time, she realized that she needed to start creating again. Though this time around, she wanted to combine her art with her social justice work. And she said, I decided I needed to use art again as a promise to take care of myself, but it could also be used as a tool for raising awareness. It would take care of two things at once. I love this. I think there's something really remarkable about those moments in life when maybe you've lived through some stuff, maybe you've had maybe you've looked at your own mortality square in the eyes, and you've had this flash of clarity, and your pain and your passion start to weave together and start to define your creative work.
Yes.
I'm so fascinated by that.
I think about that, and in the moments where that has happened for me in small ways, like it feels like such a release of the pain. When the pain becomes something,
it transforms.
It transforms it. That's a great word. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Time.com piece by Reza Bruner, Sharian said that one thing artists can do is help illustrate what comes next. Sharian said, we know what we don't want. We don't want any more Black lives targeted by police and white supremacy. But one thing that I have found we struggle with is actually imagining what kind of things we do want to see in our world. I feel like as artists, one role we could play is allowing ourselves and others to reimagine the possibilities. Our society will likely never turn back to how it used to be before the pandemic and everything happening right now. Art can be a powerful catalyst in bringing more people together to take action. That is what I'm talking about. Those are the words I think of someone who has their eyes open and they're looking to create a new world that they want to live in. And they're using their creativity to illustrate that bridge into the future and the future itself.
Suze, this is so right on target. This is what we've been talking about for a few weeks now. This idea of we have got to form in our mind's eye, what is it we want the world to look like after this? Not just passively waiting for it to become what it becomes, but rather have an image of it. And as you're saying, artists can help us all see a collective picture and agree upon that picture.
Because artists can use their imagination to see other futures, other possibilities, other ways of being, other ways of organization, of information.
And
I
help
also
us
think
visualize it. Yeah.
and help us to visualize it,
See
to
it.
help write the story that helps it like, oh, it flows in and we can understand what that might look like. Now for something completely different. On a Facebook event page hosted by Kalia Perkins, there was an event announcement titled Joy Friday. And this is a little bit from the description. We know you are out there protesting every day and collecting donations and distributing food/supplies to community, as well as trying to rebuild and uplift others who are struggling right now. We are proud of you. We love you. We admire your courage and tenacity. You are out there every single day doing what you can to support your community. This is why we wanted to remind you that you need to focus on your mental health and overall well-being. We don't want you to burn out and not be able to continue supporting the community. This Friday, that's today, we are hosting an intergenerational collective healing gathering for art, music, and movement that allows both kids and adults alike to engage in forms of play. Activities you will find: community-led art making, Zumba led by Katana Holland, spoken word from people of color impacted by the current and past events of governmental and police violence, and decompression from sensory stimulation. So also they're hosting a Facebook Live for immunocompromised and disabled individuals who would like to attend. And they stress that they are practicing social distancing and wearing masks and not reusing supplies to keep everybody safe, because in case you forgot, we're still in a pandemic. So this is actually Cam's right now, as we record this. This is happening in Minneapolis. But Kalia Perkins, if you're listening to our voices, what a gift you've created. You saw that people were working hard and fighting hard and that they needed some joy and some refreshment and some care and some recovery. And you organized it all during a pandemic. And I looked at your spreadsheet of volunteers. I saw who was working and what they were doing during what times. And I just want to say we celebrate you and the people who organized this. And we are so inspired by you.
Amazing. So inspired. That's incredible. And I hope so many people take advantage of that. I really do.
There's something that Kalia's post made me realize. I think that I have felt, if I'm honest, I have felt this sense of guilt, because I am, as somebody who is like, has social anxiety and I'm like a stone cold introvert, like being in a group, in a protest, being marching and things like that has never sat well with me. It's the source of an enormous amount of anxiety. And then I was looking at this infographic about how in a protest, Cams, if you haven't seen this, it might be super interesting to you, given the spark you just did. In a protest, different people sort of have different jobs. So there are people like put the white people up front to block, to basically run human shield
yes,
in front of the police.
Yes.
And then there are people, there are all different like roles that people can play. And I was like, ooh, that is powerful. And ooh, that doesn't make me want to attend a protest more than I did before. But I will say this, Kalia's spark of creativity that she shared in creating this day of joy for people reminded me that different people have sort of different makeups, and some people are fighters and some people are healers and some people, and I was like, I think I'm a healer. Like when I read Kalia's Facebook post, I was like, that's where I could report for duty. Like to be a healer of people. And
100%.
Like Hunter Bell, who is quarantining with us, was saying that like it's okay, like pick your lane.
That's right.
It's that meme that's going around. Pick your lane and then keep your foot on the gas.
That's right.
So if you're a healer, Susan, be a healer, but keep your fucking foot on the gas. So
it's the truth, because it's also so easy for us to get wrapped up in the guilt of what we can't do or don't feel like inspired to do, and that wastes our energy. Choose the way that you feel good supporting. that you know you can do it, that you will show up for it and do that.
But do it.
But
like,
do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So now for something completely different. Something that I saw on Celia Keenan Bolger's Instagram page
Celia.
Hi Celia, it blew my mind. In her post, she said, New Yorkers, in my bio, there is a magical link. Click it and you will immediately be sending an email to 47 city council members asking them to reject the mayor's budget, which generously funds our violent anti-Black police force while bludgeoning our already hurting, highly segregated and economically lopsided hospitals and schools. Camian, I have never seen anything like this.
What?
There is indeed a magic link in Celia's Instagram bio. And immediately, if you click on it, immediately a draft email opens up on your computer or on your phone, and it is addressed to 47 New York City Council members. And the email reads, Dear New York City Council members, my name is, fill in your name, and I am a resident of, fill in your borough. Last April, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio proposed major budget cuts for the fiscal year 2021, especially to education and youth programs, while refusing to slash the NYPD budget by any significant margin. I urge you to pressure the office of the mayor towards an ethical and equal reallocation of the New York City expense budget away from NYPD and towards social services and education programs effective at the beginning of FY21, July 1st, 2020. I am emailing to ask for an emergency council meeting among city officials regarding this matter. Governor Cuomo doubled the presence of the NYPD on New York City streets this week. I am asking that city officials lobby the same amount of attention and effort towards finding sustainable, long-term change. Thank you. Fill in your name. Camian, again, I've never seen anything like this. And
yes,
you fill in the blanks. You click send, and literally in 20 seconds, you have contacted 47 New York City Council members. This,
I'm not
to
kidding
me,
you. I'm going there right.
It is one
now.
version of using social media for real, immediate action. And if I may be so bold, Camian, I think we should. I have a link that I think we should put on the Spark File. What do they call it? The bio tree or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So. But first, a little bit more. So This magic link was created by a software engineer who has asked to remain anonymous. They have also created a website called defund12.org. That's DEFUND12.org. And if you go to the site, you'll see that they are creating this elegant, easy way to email government officials and council members to reallocate egregious police budgets towards education, social services, and dismantling racial inequality. In a piece on Vice.com, a reporter named Samantha Cole wrote this. As police escalate peaceful protests into dangerous, violent situations, people across the country are demanding that the police forces in their cities be defunded, not reformed, but denied the millions or in some cities, billions of dollars they receive each year from taxpayers. One way to make your elected officials hear your demands is via email, and a new email template tool makes it easier than ever to hit send on a message to dozens of your council members at once. In New York City, Bill de Blasio's proposed budget on the Office of the Mayor's website makes it sound like the city's budget, including the bloated police budget, is set in stone, but it's not. Council members are set to vote on it later this month. And while emails can feel less effective than phone calls or in-person lobbying, they work. Mm-hmm. Brooklyn council member Justin Brennan posted a video of his own inbox on Twitter, scrolling through page after page of emails demanding the same thing, defund the police. The caption on his tweet reads, "Every council member's inbox for the past 3 days. The people have spoken." So, If you want to make your own email template for your city's elected officials, the creator of defund12.org also created a how-to page on making mail-to redirects.
Wow.
What a way to
gift.
Expand your technical skill set. But listen, if you feel that's too daunting for you and you don't see your city listed, you can open a request on defund12.org so that your city can be added. So we can put the link in the Spark File link tree bio. We can put either defund12.org, which is the list of cities is growing. It's growing by the hour. and you find your city, you click on it, you click on that link, an email opens up. It's got all the language in there already. You can edit it as you see fit, and all the emails of those elected officials are already plugged in. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
What a remarkable use of creativity.
Yes, and using the skills you have to make bigger, to amplify.
That's right.
The message. How great that I'm delighting in.
I just want to say hats off to you, anonymous programmer, and your team. Keep
you.
on applying your imagination and keep on fighting for the powers of good.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to be crazy tech savvy to create something that is beautiful and of service to others. There is a simple static Wix website and I'm going to say the name of this website, so get out your pencils, QUIESCIS.wixsite, WIXSITE.com/make it known. Okay. It was created by at Maya Richardson, and Richardson is spelled S-U-N. Maya has been described as a theater maker and a world changer. Maya has created a list of Black mental health resources, and it includes music to uplift. It includes hotlines and warm lines that offer support over the phone. If you don't know what a warm line is essentially when you don't have to be in full-blown crisis, but you need somebody to talk to. That is a warm line.
I'm sorry, I got to stop you there. When did warm line come around? Because I've missed it, but I think that is the most genius thing.
It is genius, and the way that it keeps people on track, out of the hospital, like it really does help people work through issues before they escalate.
Yes.
And Cammie and I actually tried to find out. I did some research trying to figure out who's the first person who created a warm line. Where did the term warm line come from? Couldn't find it. Sought it out.
Know.
Couldn't find it. Yeah. There's another spark for another day.
It's so genius. I can't tell you the number of times where I'm like, I need some help. Not that badly. I wouldn't want to take resources from anyone who like really needs help. And before you know it, I can talk myself out of actually needing help with anything.
Right.
And in this case, if you actually need some help, and if the fact that there is a hotline is a barrier to entry for you, a warm line is just perfection.
Just the thing.
Oh my God.
Right. That's right.
Really,
yeah.
really
and if you go,
that.
There are great lists. Usually from the research that I did do, there are warm lines that are, you have to be in the state or in the community that you're calling into. We're all in a virtual landscape now, so that may have changed. But so hotlines, warm lines, offering support over the phone. These are all part of Maya's list that she's made. Mm-hmm. Again, this is just a static web page. It's just a Wix web page. Right. There are therapist networks. There's a host of organizations that you can donate to. I think that this is such a thoughtful, creative act to support people who are processing a great deal of trauma. Black mental health resources. And Maya is encouraging everyone to share and post this list of resources for mental health outreach to people of color. But if you're listening to this and want to donate, I think that would be great too. I think we'd like to put the link to this in our Instagram bio. So if you're so inclined, you can write a check that your ass can cash. I learned about Maya's creativity from a friend of the podcast, Austin. Hi, Austin.
Hi, Austin.
Austin lives in Georgia, and Austin is actually doing something very creative and very actionable. He has organized a Black author book drive, and he has asked his Facebook friends to join him in sponsoring a book. He's having the books delivered to his house, and then when the school doors are open and receiving, he is going to bring these books to his local area school. The books are from a BuzzFeed article written by Farah Penn entitled 23 Phenomenal Young Adult Books by Black Authors from the First Half of 2020. And if you want to be super bonus, you could bypass Amazon and purchase those books from a Black-owned bookstore. I found a fantastic list of Black-owned bookstores compiled by Corrine Siegel on lithub.com. And the books that I purchased for the book drive include This Is What I Know About Art by Kimberly Drew and Ashley Lukashevsky, The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender, and Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, a remix of the National Book Award winning Stamped from the Beginning by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. If you would like to support Austin's book drive and Black authors and Black students and Black-owned booksellers all at the same time, you can take part in the book drive, and we'll figure out how to get that link up there too.
That is so much support all at once.
Let's make it rain books.
I like it.
So for those of you who missed this Making Change Spark last time I told it, or you need a refresher, let's check back in with our friend Dave. Remember Dave, the one who was freaking out? The one who I thought might be addicted to the conversation around it. Let's pick up there. So I said, I just met you, Dave. I don't know you, but if I may be so bold, I'd like to offer you something. You can always tell me to go fuck myself, Dave, but I think I know what's going on here. But Dave didn't tell me to fuck off. In fact, his eyes lit up. He wanted to know what I was proposing. So I shared with him a little formula that my meditation teacher, Emily Fletcher, hi, Emily,
Hi, Emily.
shared with me on November 9th, 2016, when I was freaking the fuck out like our good friend Dave. It's a 4-step formula, and it goes like this. Step 1, pick a pressing issue, a need in your community or your world. Pick something that really, really lights your wick. Black Lives Matter, literacy, representation in the arts and literature, defunding the police, people without homes, clean drinking water, climate change. If you can, if you're able to right now, shut your eyes for a second. For real, right now, shut your eyes. If you're listening to this while you're driving, don't shut your eyes. Think about the most pressing need in the world for you. It can be big, it can be small. It doesn't have to impress your neighbor or your friends on social media. I know there's a lot of issues, but pick one. And at the count of 3, open your eyes and say it out loud, even if you're listening to this podcast walking down the street. Hopefully you're wearing a mask. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Now, step 2. This is important. You have to absolve yourself of the responsibility for the millions of other issues on the planet. Yes, be informed, but if you aren't going to do anything about a particular issue, don't get trapped into thinking you have to have a solution or a reaction to every single crisis. It will only get you to spin your wheels, and it's going to wear you out, like our friend Freaked Out Dave. Remember him?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Step 3, ask yourself, what are my unique gifts and talents? I'm sure you have a lot of them. Close your eyes again, unless you're operating heavy machinery, and consider, are you a great woodworker? Are you a gifted speaker? Are you an illustrator, an organizer, a healer, a musician? I know you've got a lot of gifts. Pick one you're really feeling. And at the count of 3, open your eyes and say it out loud. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, gorgeous. Now let's review. Step 1, you picked a pressing issue. Step 2, you absolve yourself of saving the world. Step 3, you define your gifts and talents. Step 4, ask yourself, which of these gifts do you want to use right now? Which of these gifts do you want to use right now? So let's put it all together. Right now, if you are a super organized planner, communicator who is super passionate about modern dancing and Black Lives Matter, then organize the hell out of an online modern dance class or performance where all the proceeds go to an awesome organization like Black Lives Matter. Right now, are you a talented computer programmer who's passionate about activism and defunding bloated police budgets and redirecting that money to education and hospitals? Then create a magic link that generates emails to local elected officials. You can multitask, like Shireen Damre, who said, I use art as a promise to take care of myself, but it could also be used as a tool for raising awareness. I can take care of 2 things at once. But here's the magical, tricky part. Like I told Dave, Dave, there's no one busier or lazier than me. But if you want to change the way you feel right now, if you want to make change, you have to do something. You have to pick a thing and do it.
Oh.
And of course, it's fine, and in some cases, extremely powerful to express yourself on social media. But as Ego Wodum said, recognize your social media posts as simply a declaration of your commitment to do something.
Mm-hmm. In real life.
In real life.
Oh, amen.
I'd like to close with the words of Shiri and Damra. I just want this to be the last thing people hear, not in their lives on this podcast today. Our society will likely never turn back to how it used to be before the pandemic and everything happening right now. Art can be a powerful catalyst in bringing more people together to take action. I feel as artists, one role we could play is allowing ourselves and others to reimagine the possibilities. Friends, it's time to reimagine the possibilities.
Let's picture it
and
together.
That is my spark for today.
Suze, there's so much good happening.
There's so much good happening.
Inspiring.
There's so much challenging shit happening.
Yeah.
I don't want to, let's not, let's call it like it is.
That's still there. That's
still there. And there are people doing great creative work. There are people fighting hard.
Yep.
There are people healing those people who are fighting hard.
They're trying to uplift. They're trying to give us a new perspective on the victims of these brutal crimes, trying to make us think differently about what's happening and to picture a future that we could share collectively.
That's right. That's right.
Art,
Camion. The possibilities.
I love you.
The possibilities, Camion. So I guess that's it. I hope this put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen to us. If there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and you fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, please email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you have to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
You can follow us on social media at The Spark File and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. If you like this podcast, we hope you'll share it with people you love. If you didn't like it, frankly, I question your taste.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to rock some web design or paint a protest sign. Make some art straight from your heart and let your passion shine, people.
That was a good one. You got to take it and make it. Suze.
Cam.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.